Number 12. AMC Rambler American. The Rambler American occupied precisely the right market position at precisely the right moment, the American economy car, arriving as imports were demonstrating that small, efficient, and affordable were not mutually exclusive. That timing should have been an advantage. The execution limited how competitive it ultimately became. American Motors positioned the Rambler American as a direct answer to the Volkswagen Beetle and the Japanese compacts gaining visibility in American showrooms. The pitch was credible. The build quality that buyers experienced in service records was not. Fit and finish varied between production units in ways that buyers comparing it to Volkswagen's assembly standards found difficult to overlook on the same dealer lot. The inline-six was mechanically adequate in isolation, but the platform generated complaints about body flex and early rust that the car's economy car pricing had not prepared buyers to absorb as part of the transaction. The Rambler American had the right idea and delivered only the first half of it consistently. Number 11. Ford Falcon. The Ford Falcon outsold the Corvair and the Valiant in most years of its early production, a commercial success that its quality record complicated in ways the sales figures did not reflect. Rust was the Falcon's most documented failure. Body panels and floor sections deteriorated in northern climates at rates that owners found inconsistent with cars still within reasonable service age. The unibody construction's susceptibility to corrosion became apparent within 2 to 3 ownership seasons in salt-treated environments. Mechanical reliability was adequate rather than distinguished. The inline-six performed without notable weakness, but also without the durability standard that the Volkswagen Beetle was establishing in direct competition. The Falcon is also notable historically as the platform that underpinned the first-generation Mustang, a lineage that explains why that car required considerably more chassis development before it could support the performance identity its marketing implied. Number 10. Buick Special. The Buick Special arrived in 1961 built around an innovative 215 cubic inch aluminum V8, a genuine engineering achievement that real-world ownership exposed in ways the development program had not fully resolved. The aluminum block was sensitive to cooling conditions that cast iron engines handled without consequence. Improper coolant mixture, minor overheating events, and cooling system leaks produced internal damage in the aluminum V8 at rates that buyers of a Buick, a brand whose identity rested on quality above the Chevrolet line, found inconsistent with the badge. The overheating sensitivity required owner awareness that the car's marketing had not communicated clearly. GM eventually sold the aluminum V8 design to Rover, which used it successfully for decades, with modifications that addressed the problems GM's production version had encountered. That transaction is its own commentary. The Buick Special is at number 10 because its defining innovation was also its defining failure point, arriving on buyers whose expectations a Buick nameplate had set at a specific level.
Number 9. Plymouth Valiant. The Plymouth Valiant arrived in 1960 as Chrysler's answer to the compact revolution, the acknowledgement that smaller, more efficient cars had become commercially necessary rather than commercially optional. The first 2 production years established a pattern that several of Chrysler's early decade launches would repeat, arriving before the development process had completed its work. The front suspension attracted owner complaints and dealer service records across the early production run. Electrical faults accumulated in ways that later production resolved, but early buyers experienced as a recurring ownership feature. Build quality varied between units at a rate that distinguished the early Valiant from the durable reputation the platform eventually earned. The Slant 6 became one of the most dependable engines Chrysler ever produced, but that reputation was built on refinements that arrived after the 1960-1962 buyers had already discovered what those refinements were correcting. The early Valiant story is the story of a sound concept shipped before its execution was ready. Number 8. AMC Marlin. The AMC Marlin entered the market in 1965 with an identity problem that no engineering or marketing solution was going to resolve. It was a fastback body applied to the Rambler Classic platform, priced in direct competition with the Mustang, a car whose identity was the opposite of uncertain. The Marlin was too large for the pony car segment and too sporting in appearance for practical family transportation, which left it competing in a category it had created for itself and that no buyer segment was actively seeking. Sales reflected the mismatch, approximately 10,000 units in 1965, declining annually through discontinuation in 1967. The Rambler platform beneath it was a known quantity, but adequate mechanics underneath a confused identity is insufficient when the competitive landscape includes the Mustang, the Barracuda, and the Camaro. The Marlin is not here for mechanical failure. It is here because AMC committed resources to a car without a coherent answer to what every buyer asks: what is this, and why would I choose it over the alternative? Number 7. Dodge Dart First Generation. The Dodge Dart that buyers know, the compact that spent the late 1960s building one of the most durable reliability reputations in American automotive history, was not the car that arrived in 1960. The first-generation Dart was a full-size vehicle carrying the quality inconsistencies that defined Chrysler's early-decade manufacturing. Electrical faults were consistent across the early production run. Body rust in structural areas appeared faster than buyers at mainstream price points expected. Fit and finish varied between units in ways that made individual ownership experiences diverge significantly from one another. The automatic transmission configurations attracted complaints that the car's positioning as a mainstream family vehicle made difficult to justify. The first-generation Dart's most useful historical contribution may be the contrast it provides with what replaced it. The compact Dart, redesigned for 1963, became everything this version was not. That improvement happened because the original record made it necessary. Number 6. Mercury Comet. The Mercury Comet began its life as a car for a brand that no longer existed, developed as the Edsel Comet before Ford canceled that program, then absorbed into Mercury in 1960 with minimal additional development time. The early Comet's unibody construction rusted in structural areas within 2 to 3 ownership seasons in northern climates. Body sills and floor sections deteriorated at rates buyers found unacceptable on a new car. The automatic transmission developed shifting complaints across the early production run. Handling reflected a platform redirected to a new identity without the engineering time to reconcile the two. Consumer Reports documented the early Comet's reliability below the compact class average across multiple years. The Comet is at number 6 because its failure was structural and systemic, a product carrying the consequences of a canceled predecessor into the ownership experience of buyers who had no way of knowing what they were inheriting. That it improved significantly in later years only confirms how unresolved it was when it first reached showrooms. Number 5. Oldsmobile Toronado. Motor Trend named the Oldsmobile Toronado its Car of the Year for 1966. The same car used 4-wheel drum brakes on a front-wheel drive coupe weighing more than 4,300 pounds. The Toronado was the first American front-wheel drive production car since the 1930s, built around a 425 cubic inch V8 and an unusual chain drive transmission system. The engineering itself was ambitious and largely successful. The problem was that several parts of the car struggled to match the performance and weight the platform created. Period road tests criticized braking performance under repeated hard stops, where the heavy drum brake setup could produce noticeable fade. Disc brakes were not available on the 1966 model, despite the car's size and power. Early production cars also required refinements to the complex front drive system as GM improved durability and drivability during the first years of production. The Toronado is here not because it was a catastrophic failure, but because it demonstrated how quickly Detroit sometimes rushed advanced engineering into production.
It won one of the industry's most prestigious awards while still asking early buyers to absorb compromises that a more developed platform likely would have resolved before launch. Number 4. Chrysler Imperial. The Imperial occupied a difficult position throughout the 1960s, priced in direct competition with Cadillac and Lincoln while delivering a manufacturing standard that buyers paying Cadillac prices found uneven, particularly in the mid-decade years. Electrical faults accumulated across the decade at rates that owners of similarly priced Cadillac DeVilles did not encounter to the same degree. Body rust in structural areas appeared within ownership timelines that buyers at the Imperial's price points found difficult to accept. Interior materials wore at rates that compared unfavorably with the GM and Ford luxury alternatives. Consumer satisfaction data placed the Imperial below its direct competitors on multiple quality measures throughout the period. The Imperial's recurring challenge was that it was sold as a Cadillac alternative to buyers who discovered the gap between those two things was wider than the price difference implied. Some model years were more competitive than others, but across the decade, that inconsistency kept it a distant third in the luxury segment.
Number 3. Chrysler Turbine Car. The Chrysler Turbine Car was among the most ambitious automotive projects of the decade. In practice, it documented why a turbine engine in a passenger car presented problems that 1960s technology could not resolve for ordinary buyers. Chrysler produced 55 turbine cars and placed them in the hands of 203 American families across 133 cities in a real-world evaluation program that ran from 1963 to 1966. The program revealed consistent problems. The starting procedure was counterintuitive enough that owners repeatedly risked flooding the engine. Acceleration was unimpressive, fuel economy was poor at low speeds, and the exhaust was louder than expected. When the program ended, Chrysler destroyed 46 of the 55 cars. The turbine car is here because Chrysler placed experimental technology in ordinary American households, gathered 1 million miles of documented failure data, and then destroyed most of the vehicles. The buyers who drove them for 3 months provided proof that the technology was not ready and were returned to their conventional cars when the program concluded. Number 2. Pontiac Tempest. The Pontiac Tempest is the entry on this list that engineers reference most readily, not for the scale of its failure, but for the specificity of its engineering decision and what that decision produced in service records across the country. The Tempest used a rear transaxle connected to the engine by a flexible, rope-like drive shaft that Pontiac believed would improve weight distribution. In practice, it introduced vibration at certain speeds, with sensitive to manufacturing tolerances difficult to sustain at production volumes, and generated a repair record that dealers could not address consistently. The semi-automatic transmission added its own complaint volume. By 1964, Pontiac had replaced the rope drive with a conventional drive shaft, an acknowledgement made in engineering rather than in press releases that the original design had not worked at scale. The Tempest is at number 2 because it deployed an unvalidated innovation across a high-volume platform and had its buyers absorb the cost of that validation. Number 1. Chevrolet Corvair. The Chevrolet Corvair's place at number 1 is not simply about the swing axle suspension. It is about what the Corvair's history revealed concerning how the American automotive industry handled documented safety concerns and what that handling ultimately produced. GM possessed internal data on the Corvair's handling before Ralph Nader published Unsafe at Any Speed in 1965. The swing axle suspension could produce oversteer under conditions ordinary drivers were not trained to manage. GM's response became as consequential as the criticism. The company hired investigators to surveil Nader, a decision that led to GM's president testifying before the Senate and apologizing publicly. That congressional attention contributed directly to the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1966, the legislation that created federal automotive safety standards for the first time.
The Corvair is at number 1 because its story produced a regulatory framework that affected every car sold in America afterward.